Hello there friends and welcome. This video will be an update over my beginner's caster guide for an intelligent focused caster, but this time with pretty much the best spells, gears and combos you can get in the mid and late game, including the most powerful combo of them all with Comet Azur to easily destroy any bosses that you might face. So without further ado, let's get started right with how to get your Comet Azur going, because it's not just a matter of casting it, you also have a lot of different ways to empower it, as to ensure you really kill the bosses fast, because it is a pretty FP intensive spell, and you can actually get interrupted while casting. First, let's talk about how to get Comet Azur. You can gain it by talking with the primeval sorcerer Azur in the mountaintop of the Giants area, but getting here can be a bit tricky because of all of the cliffs and mountains in the region. The easiest way is to start from the Seathwater River Grace. If you haven't found it yet, it's pretty simple. From the Erdtree Grazing Hill, which is very close to the Grand Lift of Dectus, where you start in this area, you just head a little bit northwest to reach the Erdtree Grazing Hill, and after that, keep going northwest for the Seathwater River. From the Seathwater River, you'll want to keep going north first. Careful with the fire. Keep going past the river. Straight ahead. Right, so you can find a grace here, which is the Seathwater Terminus. So be sure to activate it. In case you die, you can just respawn here. Now go past the barricades, then turn south, past the fire machine here, and you'll want to cross this lake of lava. You can ignore the boss, of course, just go to the right side and keep going straight ahead. And now enter this path. Go past the coffins, up here, and just keep heading east. So now we are pretty close to the Hermit village we have to get to, which is right past the barricades ahead. So here we are, the Hermit village. You just have to sprint past all of the enemies now. And right here, there will be a boss, the demi-human Queen Mage, but you can completely avoid her. So just drop right here to the bonfire, activate it, and then rest at it, which should reset the enemies. Now speak with this guy right here. He won't say anything at first, but if you speak again, he'll give you the Comet Azur spell, which is what we're really here for. Getting Comet Azur is just the first step, however, because as you might have already noticed, it costs an absurd amount of FP to cast. Thankfully, there is a way to get infinite FP for 10 seconds, which is more than enough to channel our Comet Azur to easily destroy or heavily cripple any boss. And this is what I'm going to teach you how to do now. For that, we need to mix our Wondrous Physic Flask with the Cerulean Hidden Tear. That eliminates all FP consumption. Another great tier is the Intelligence Not Crystal tier, which gives you a plus 10 boost to intelligence for 3 minutes. Plenty of time for bosses and tough enemies. Even for dungeon crawling. Anyways, to get the Cerulean Hidden Tear, you'll have to defeat an Erdtree avatar in the Mount Gelmir region. So from the Road of Inequity Grace, the Erdtree is pretty close. All you have to do is, well, head east, down the road here, just proceed down the path, and you can already see the burned tree in the distance there. And there it is. I suggest you start by summoning your trusty skeleton minions, wait for the boss to aggro them. I recommend you go with Rock Sling as usual, and the Meteorite Staff. And that was it. So now we have the Leadenheart tier and the Cerulean Hidden tier, which is the one we came here for. Now simply head to any grace, mix Wondrous Physic, and slot your Intelligence boosting tier from Intelligence not Crystal tier, and of course, our newly acquired Cerulean Hidden tier to eliminate all of our FP costs for 10 whole seconds. And if you're wondering where the Intelligence boosting tier is, from the road to the manor in Liurnia of the Lakes, simply head northeast and it will be right here, next to the road in a bowl, close to some minor spider hand enemies. Now that we already have Comet Azur and a way to spam it, we need to work on increasing our damage, and for that we first are going to learn how to get the Luzad's Glintstone Staff, which is pretty much the strongest staff in the game as far as spell damage. And it is pretty easy to get to. This staff has a passive that increases the power of all your sorceries, but at the same time also makes them consume additional FP, which as far as Comet Azur doesn't really matter, because we have no FP cost for 10 whole seconds. And as for your other spells, you have your flasks to easily handle them. To get Luzad's staff, you'll have to go to the Cilia village in the Kaled region, so right here. Close to the place where we found the meteorite staff if you've watched my beginner's caster guide. We will have to defeat a duo of bosses to get our staff. But first we have to unlock the seal that blocks the door to them. So from the Celia under Stair Grace, which is the first before the village, you'll want to keep going to the left, then up the stairs here. And now drop on top of this branch. Keep going up. Use your horse to jump as it's easier with the double jump. Now just climb the stairs here on top of this tower. The ladders, I mean. And light this brazier. This will unlock the boss door. And to get to the boss, just drop down. Down again. And go right here. The two bosses we have to fight will be beyond this door. They aren't really hard to defeat, and right after them you can loot our staff from this chest here. Now that we have our powerful staff and Comet Azur, and a way to channel it for a long time, we're still missing other ways of further increasing its power. And the most important one is the Terra Magica spell. This spell will create a magic sigil on the ground, and while you are on top of it, and also for a few seconds after leaving, ideally you want to stay on top of it, it will increase your magic damage by around 35%, which is huge. So ideally you always want to cast Terra Magicas before using Comet Azur. Getting this spell is pretty simple too. You'll have to first go to the Academy Crystal Cave, which is right here in the Liurnia of the Lakes region. The easiest way to get to the cave is to teleport to the Crystalline Woods Grace, and then you just have to go right here. The cave is not actually on top of the Academy Island, it's at the shore instead, right at this part here where I have set my blue marker. You can spot the entrance easily because there will be two of the blue scarab enemies here, right before. Remember that you have to use a stone sword key to unlock it, and like most of the caves it's also pretty dark inside, so go with a torch or a lantern. After this all you have to do is reach the two bosses. It's a pretty straightforward area. As for the bosses, you'll have to fight two Crystallian enemies. The easiest way to handle them is by using your summons. I have two of my skeleton militia here to easily take their attention away from you while you can spam spells from afar. Rock Sling is a great spell against them because the Crystallians will only start taking big damage after you break their stance or guard. With Rock Sling it is pretty fast, so don't be surprised if they only take a little damage at first. Now instead of using the teleporter to go back to the entrance, use the elevator right here. Once you reach the top, go up the stairs, and here we are, the chest with our very powerful magic boosting spell, Terra Magicas. Lastly, we have yet another piece of gear to get to increase our Comet Azur damage even further, Azur's Glintstone Crown. This headgear will increase the power of your Comet Azur by around 10 to 50%, while at the same time increasing the FP cost of all your spells, which doesn't really matter, once again because of our Cerulean Hidden tier effect. As far as bosses at least, which is where Comet Azur shines. Getting it can be a bit complicated however. You will have to complete the quest of the NPC Selen, who is also the first of the spell merchants you meet in the Waypoint Ruined Cellar area. The quest can be somewhat long, so I'll soon be posting a standalone guide with all of the steps that you have to take, but to keep it short, after you complete Selen's quest, you can go back to the Primeval Sorcerer Azur, NPC, thankfully there is a Grace right next to him, and you'll be able to loot his crown and also his armor set from his corpse. Because we want to squeeze every single bit of damage possible, to increase the power of our Comet Azur, I strongly recommend you get this helmet. Now if you really want your Comet Azur to do maximum damage, there is yet another spell we can get to further increase our combo power. Ranni's Dark Moon. This spell also has a lesser version called Renala's Full Moon, that you can get by exchanging Renala's Remembrance. Ranni's Dark Moon, however, is stronger and inflicts around a 30% magic negation debuff to the enemy. This doesn't mean that they will take 30% more spell damage, but it will certainly highly increase your Comet Azur damage, and also that of all of your other magical spells. To get it, you have to complete Ranni's quest. It's probably the longest and most involved quest of them all in the game, and I'm also preparing a standalone guide where I'll show you all of the steps you need to take to complete this quest. But anyways, Ranni's Dark Moon has a rather long casting time, and it will launch a big moon ball that will explode upon hitting the enemy. The damage is pretty great, but most importantly, we really want the magic resistance debuff. Now just for a quick recap, your basic Comet Azur combo should be: first, Ranni's Dark Moon to reduce the enemy's resistance against spell damage. Second, Terra Magicus. Third, your FP Flask. And lastly, Comet Azur. Just as a note that not all of the enemies will stagger, most of them actually won't when casting Comet Azur, so you need to be careful. Ideally you want to distract them with summons before unleashing your Comet Azur, otherwise they will attack you and interrupt or break your casting. Now that we already know how to get the strongest spell combo going with Comet Azur to easily destroy bosses, let's talk about some other powerful spells that your intelligence-focused spellcaster can get in the mid and late game to help them defeat the other enemies. First we have Night Maiden's Mist. You can get this pretty early, and it will create a life-sapping fog in front of your character that deals pretty high damage over time to the enemies so long as they stand inside the cloud and a few seconds after leaving it. The damage can really add up, and it is very easy to cheese some large enemies with the spell by just moving around them while casting this, especially for the slower enemies. You can actually charge the spell to increase the mist fog area even further. Just be careful because it does have friendly fire and will actually hurt your own character if you stand inside the cloud. To get Maiden's Mist, you have to buy it from Gowry after doing his quest. Gowry can be found right here in this shack, to the south of the Cilia Understair Grace, which is the main Cilia Grace. For another very powerful spell we have Adula's Moonblade. This spell will conjure a very big and wide greatsword that your character will attack the enemy with. The best part is, well, not only the wide area, but also the fact this spell will cast a projectile after you swing your magical greatsword, so you can also hit enemies decently far from you. And of course, as cold damage, it can inflict frostbite upon the enemy. To get Adula's Moonblade, you'll have to defeat the Glintstone Dragon Adula, but you can only do this at the end of Ranni's quest, just like with Ranni's Dark Moon spell. Now for another decent but somewhat situational spell, we have Ambush Shard. This spell shines when fighting against enemies that have shields, because unlike the other spells, it's very unique in that it will cast a projectile that hits the enemy from behind, so the enemy can't really block this. You can find Ambush Shard in the Witchbane Ruins, to the western part of the Weeping Peninsula south of the starter area. Now that we have the best spell combo and the best spells overall, let's talk about the best remaining gear for our mage, so other staves, armor and talismans. I know I said Lusas is the best staff overall, and it really is, but here's a fun note. You can actually dual wield your staffs, that's right. So you'll cast spells with your right hand staff, meanwhile you can use your left hand staff to benefit from whatever passives you might have. For example, I have both Lusats here for high damage, and also Azur's Glintstone staff to increase the spellcasting speed of all of my spells. There is something to consider, however, because if your staff also has a downside, in this case both Azur and also Lusat, cause my spells to cost additional FP, well, this will stack. So both your beneficial effects, so higher damage and higher casting speed, and also the downsides, higher FP cost, will stack with one another, so keep that in mind. On the other hand, like I said, if you're going for your Comet Azur, you can just sip your flask for 10 seconds of no FP or whatever other spell you want to cast with increased casting speed, without caring about FP. It's certainly enough to chain your spells by quite a lot, to the point you can easily overcome the FP cost penalty. Now, Azur's Glintstone Staff can be found on the upper area of the Cuckoo Church in the Rhea Lucaria Academy. After you reach this section, you'll go through a corridor. There will be an enemy right ahead of us, and right ahead, beneath this structure, you'll get Azur's Glintstone Staff. You can of course combine your Lusat Staff with another staff like even Meteorite, if you want higher power to your Rock Sling or Gravity spells, the Carrion Regal Scepter for a boost to Full Moon spells including Runny's Dark Moon, and so on. Alright, now let's talk about armor for our mage. I know a lot of people won't really like this, but honestly, I actually don't like going with the mage sets like Alberich, Lusat, Azur, Preceptor, Runnies, the Sage set, and Renalis, at least as far as body armor, bracers, and pants. Because these slots don't often tend to have any effects whatsoever besides increasing your defenses. The Headgear slot, on the other hand, often has unique effects. For example, with a normal light or mage set, my character has pretty decent damage, defense, and negation against magic and elemental, so 26, 24, and so on. On the other hand, your physical defenses are pretty disappointing, just 11 and 10. Meanwhile, if we equip a heavy armor set besides our helmet, I still retain very high magic and elemental defenses, but on the other hand, our physical defenses also skyrocket. That's 32 physical negation. Trust me when I say this does matter a lot. 32 physical damage negation is pretty much, well, not the same, but very close to having around 32%, so 1/3, of the enemy's physical damage negated. When it comes to the upper mid to the late game, enemies have very high damage, and this will help you a lot. And you might be wondering, well, but what about your dodge rolls and speed? It is pretty easy to retain a medium load for your medium roll, which is frankly fast enough and good enough for avoiding enemy attacks, even as a mage who doesn't invest much into endurance. All thanks to stuff like the Great Jar Talisman, to highly increase your equipment load, and also Godric's Great Rune for a +5 to all physical stats, including endurance. This way you get maximum defenses, both against physical damage and magical and elemental, for a very tanky character, even as a mage, who is still reasonably fast. If you were to ask me what armor sets I like the best, for the mid and the late game, Radagon's set is pretty easy to get, because all you have to do is defeat Radagon. I know it can be a tough battle, but there's many ways to cheese him, like casting the Rot Breath spell, and also the Veteran set that you get by defeating Commander Niall. The good thing about both of these sets is that you just have to defeat a boss, and then you can buy them. Now let's talk about the best headgear choices for our mage characters. I'd say there's two main ones, for the mid game at least, the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown and also the Queen's Crescent Crown. Twin Sage will increase your intelligence by 6 hull points, but at the same time it also reduces your hit points, which can be somewhat dangerous. The Queen's Crescent Crown only increases your intelligence by half the amount, so +3, but doesn't have any downside at all. Both can be acquired at the same time. For the Queen's Crescent Crown, you just have to defeat Renala, the story boss of the Rhea Lucaria Academy. As for the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown, it's a bit trickier to get, so I'll show you the entire way through. From the Debate Parlor, Grace, go right ahead, turn left here, go up the structure, up the stairs, careful with the mages. Now jump here over the balcony, go up and handle the other mage, or just sprint past him. Now jump over here, and there's going to be a lot of jumping yet, so keep walking past the rooftops. Might as well just keep the annoying enemies. So up this ladder. Once you are up here, just keep going right ahead. You can ignore the enemies just fine. There's some birds and also a caster. I ate all of the damage. Anyways, drop right here. Then here. And here. Drop right again. Another drop here. One more. Now notice this wooden part here. Drop it. Again. Our final drop at last. And now just kill this crystallized crab enemy. And here we are, the Twin Sage Glintstone Crown. These helmets are great until you can reach the intelligent Softcap that I will show you later on. You can also go with the Snow Witch Rat, which is Runny's special hat, that increases the power of your cold spells, including your Adula's Cold Moonblade. And remember, for bosses, when you want to use Comet Azur, go with Azur's Glintstone Crown, as I've already explained to you. Now let's talk about another very important part of this guide, your talismans. The first talismans you should rush for are the Graven School Talisman and also the Graven Mass. They actually do stack with one another, and both increase the power of all your sorcery spells. The normal Graven by around 4%, while the Graven Mass by around 8%. So when you combine both, you have plus 12% extra damage, pretty good. To get the lesser version, like many of the great magical items, it is in the Rhea Lucaria Academy. So from the Debate Parlor Grace, simply head back to this little room here. There will be a shelf here that you can hit. It does actually contain a secret path for once. So keep moving right ahead. Now for our talisman, you have to go up. And in this part, jump here, as the message says, then drop down the broken part of it. Go down again. And there we are, at the center of the room. In the crystals are a very powerful Graven School Talisman. Now for the Graven Mass Talisman, you have to go to the Albinauric Rise Tower, in the mountain tops of the Giants region, so the snowy area. The closest grace would be... Now as you arrive at the tower, the main entrance will be sealed. Like all of the Rise Towers, we need to solve a puzzle before being granted entrance. The easiest way is to first summon an imp. To get an imp summon, first teleport to the main academy gate, Grace, in the Liurnia of the Lakes region. Now simply head east, down alongside this path, and right here at the end you'll find a merchant.
But I'm new to this.
Selling the Fanged Imp Ashes, and summon your 2 imps right at the entrance. Then kill one of the enemies here while they are summoned. So the seal on the rise opened. We can now enter. And here we are, the Graven Mass Talisman. Another talisman you might consider getting is the Radagon icon, to shorten your spellcasting speed. This does actually stack with Azur's Glintstone Staff, so they can make for a pretty powerful combo, even if you have low dexterity. I only have 17 for example. Once again, go to the Debate Parlor Grace at the Rhea Lucaria Academy, and into the courtyard. After we've reached the courtyard, go right, jump over here, climb up the ladder, ahead and then jump over the broken window, and go to the right now. Climb the stairs, open the chest for the red dragon icon. Now let's do some quick spellcasting speed tests to show you how much difference both Azur's Glintstone Staff and the talisman we just got can make. So this is Adula's Moonblade without any of them. At 17 dexterity. Now with both the Glintstone Staff and Radagon icon. I'd say the difference is pretty noticeable. You certainly attack a lot faster, which can make a difference in a fast-paced game. Now for another Talisman slot, well, this can go a number of different ways, and you can of course not care much about Radagon icon if you're just going to be spamming Comet Azure. But anyways, the Great Jar's Arsenal can be great if you are playing a character as a mage that has heavy armor like I am, for very great damage negation overall. You can find the Great Jar by dueling 3 NPCs right in front of the so-called Great Jar NPC. The Great Jar NPC will be in this area here, but you can only access it through the Siofra Well. From the Siofra River Well area, go to the Worshipper's Woods Grace, then head north until you reach this platform here. Use a Stone Sword key that will let you ride an elevator, dropping you right at the Deep Siofra Well Grace. From that, just head west and you'll soon encounter the Great Jar. There are other talismans you might consider too, such as the Air Tree's Favor to raise your maximum hit points, stamina and equip load, and this can go up to +2. And also during the mid game, the Stargazer Heirloom to increase your intelligence by +5. So by combining Stargaze with Renala's Crown or the Twin Sage Crown, you can get a pretty nice boost to intelligence to equip spells that require high intelligence like Comet Azure even earlier. Now, at last, let us talk about attribute point allocation for our mid and late game spellcaster. When it comes to intelligence, I already have a guide link to the side here, where you can learn everything you need to know about the intelligence soft cap. But to keep it simple, there's no point in going above 80 intelligence as far as spell damage, if you want to maximize your point's effectiveness, that is. For Vigor, a safe stopping point for a mage would be something around 40 to 50. For Mind, I like going with, well, 25 to 30. This should give you enough FP to cast a lot of spells. Because I'm going with heavy armor, I also spent some points into endurance. I don't find much of an use for strength and dexterity, because this is just a pure caster, I don't really wield any weapons. As for Faith and Arcane, well, I just get the bonus from Godric's Great Rune, which is +5 to all my stats. So if you want to cast some low Faith and Arcane incantations, you can have them just fine. Early on, I do think the best stats to focus would be Intelligence and also Vigor. Intelligence, of course, for our spell damage, and because Comet Azure and Lusat's staff both have very high intelligence requirements. Vigor for more hit points, which are a must, especially in the mid and late game. Later on, a bit of Mind. The thing with Mind is, well, you can get a lot of FP restoring flasks, and for bosses we have the infinite FP effect from our Cerulean tier. Endurance is something I would only bother increasing later on. So long as you have medium load and medium rolls, you're golden. Now before I really end this guide, I think it's nice to just show my preferred spell allocation for the mid and late game. Well, we actually do still have Glintstone Pebble. It is basically a bread and butter spell, and can be useful even until the late game. When compared to the other versions like the Swift and the Great Glintstone Shards, Glintstone Pebble retains great FP cost, nice damage, and most importantly great range as well. So for single target fast damage, I really recommend it. Run its Dark Moon to increase our magical damage against enemies. Terra Magicus for the same purpose. Comet Azure, no explanation needed. Adula's Moonblade for the very wide reach, great damage and the frost effect. Carrion Slicer can also be quite useful even in the late game, because of the very fast attacks, the great damage and the super low FP cost. Night Maiden's Mist too for the very large area of effect, and Crippling damage over time effect. Before you can get Adula's Moonblade, Glintstone Arc will remain your best area of effect spell, no doubt. And Rock's Link can still have some uses as well, because of how great it is at staggering enemies and breaking their stance. Alright everyone, so this was it for my ultimate Intelligence Caster guide, especially for the mid and late game, with all of the best combos, gears and spells you can have. I hope I've managed to properly explain to you what makes Mages so great. If you found this guide useful, then please remember to like, subscribe and even consider becoming a channel member to help support it, if you can. If you think I missed on something, then please be sure to comment down below. Thank you for watching and see you next time, friends.